Hello and welcome to another episode of Down to Disness, a monthly series where I pick a Disney animated movie, talk about its history and its impact on pop culture. This month's movie is Bambi, released in 1942. I'm freaking out a little bit because there's a lot to say about Bambi. It is a super significant movie in the history of Disney animation. Bambi did a lot of things differently, not only from the Disney movies that came before it, but from all of the Disney movies that came after it. For example, there's very little dialogue in the movie. There's actually only 1,000 words of dialogue in the entire film. It also has a soundtrack where none of the songs are actually sung by characters in the movie. And it was the first Disney movie to not have any humans in it. Even though Man is a recurring character in the film, he's never actually on screen. One thing that set Bambi apart from other animated shorts or films at the time was that Walt Disney decided to use actual children to voice the children characters in the film. Previously, animation companies usually always just had adults play these roles with a childlike voice, but Walt wanted actual children to play the children. Peter Ben was one of many children who auditioned for the role of Thumper in Bambi. The casting director at the time was actually furious with his performance and declared that he could not act and would never be considered for the part. The animators, however, heard his audition tape and loved him. They brought him back, ended up giving him the role, and based a lot of Thumper's character around his vocal performance. Donnie Dunagan ended up being the voice of Bambi, and he was also actually the model for Bambi's facial expressions. Now, although Disney did have experience animating animals for movies like Snow White, they didn't have the experience making them expressive enough to hold a movie on their own. Deer in particular were difficult for the animators to draw because their eyes are on the sides of their head, and they don't really have a chin, which makes speech difficult to animate. Eventually, it was Disney legend Mark Davis that resolved these issues by infusing the character of Bambi and his other deer friends with the traits of a human baby's face. Of course then, Donnie Dunagan helped by giving them more facial references to work with. Dunagan later in his life was a Marine, and he actually hid the fact that he was the voice of Bambi from all of his colleagues because he didn't want people to make fun of him. Nowadays, we would all kill to be the voice of a Disney character. But I get it. Bambi, like many other Disney movies, is based off of a book, this one written by Felix Salten. Salten ended up selling the rights to his story to a man named Sidney Franklin for only $1,000. Franklin actually first had the idea to turn Bambi into a movie in 1933, but he actually envisioned it as a live-action film. His mind was changed when he saw Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs for the first time, and he realized what animators could do with the story, so he brought the idea to Walt Disney. Disney started working on the movie in 1936 and actually wanted it to be the second movie they ever made after Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. But Walt Disney had a very specific vision for Bambi and wanted it to be very realistic, and so this delayed the process a lot. In the end, Pinocchio, Fantasia, and Dumbo were all released before Bambi was finished. The realism that Walt was searching for was achieved in the end by Tyrus Wong. Tyrus Wong was a Chinese-American animator who was especially skilled with murals. He basically ended up doing all of the backgrounds for Bambi. You'll notice they all have a distinctly Chinese style to them. He intentionally made all of the backgrounds very soft so that the main characters would pop off of the screen. There are a lot of huge differences between the Bambi book and the Bambi movie. Notably, the book is really not made for children. It's gruesome, somewhat sexual, and very dark. Also, the characters of Thumper and Flower were not in the book, but are original Disney creations. There's also a bit of copyright drama involving Salten, Franklin, Disney, and a company called Twin Books. Salten, the original author of the Bambi book, copyrighted the story and the characters, but he then passed his copyright on to Franklin, who passed it on to Disney for the purposes of making a film. He did not, however, intend for Walt Disney to use the characters in any other way. This includes books, comics, posters, toys, all the other merchandise did not fall under their deal, but Disney used the characters anyway. Sidney Franklin and his family never had issue with this. It wasn't until 1993 when the Salten family rights were sold to a company called Twin Books. When Twin Books acquired the copyright to Bambi, they sued Disney immediately. This case went to trial many times, but never came to a conclusion. Both companies maintain rights to different versions of the exact same characters. The artistry of Bambi really is its primary mark on the history of animation. In addition to Tyrus Wong's amazing work, this movie is also famous for the biggest use of the multiplane camera yet. The multiplane camera had definitely been used before, but it was used so much on Bambi in such huge ways. The opening scene of Bambi, you gotta watch it. Here it is. It's crazy. That multiplane action. What The art of Bambi eventually landed it a spot in the Library of Congress's National Film Registry for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. That's a big deal. And while a lot of later Disney films like The Jungle Book and The Aristocats are famous for containing a lot of reused animation, Bambi is actually responsible for some of the most reused animation in Disney history. For example, a lot of shots of birds and leaves have been reused in lots of other Disney movies that came after Bambi. But Bambi and his mother do make cameos in a few Disney movies themselves. These movies include Beauty and the Beast, The Jungle Book, Sword in the Stone, and The Rescuers. I would like to say that Bambi is famous just for its amazing artistry, but honestly there's another really big part of the movie that makes it famous not only in Disney history but film history overall. And that, of course, is the scene where Bambi's mom gets shot. Here's the thing, I recently rewatched Bambi, and the scene where Bambi's mom dies is so much less impactful than people make it seem when they talk about it. The fact alone that they don't actually show it on screen is what's shocking to me. The death of Bambi's mother is definitely one of the most famous pieces of animated or film history ever. People reference it all the time, people are traumatized by it, people talk about their childhoods being ruined from watching that scene, and it's funny to go back and watch it because it's so understated in the movie. But Bambi definitely is famous for that scene. In pop culture and in film history, Bambi is remembered for that. So Bambi did eventually end up making enough money to consider it a financial success with re-releases and such, but it did perform very poorly at the box office in the beginning. But this is mostly due to the war. So many Disney movies were affected by World War II, and Bambi is no exception. As a result of the war, it was released in fewer markets than a movie would normally be released in, and so therefore it didn't make as much money as it would have normally. It was also the last full-length animated feature that Disney made until Cinderella, because too many animators were in the war. Still, it ended up being a financial success, and it's also known to be one of Walt Disney's favorite films that he ever made. It also holds the record for biggest gap between original film and sequel, with 64 years between the original Bambi and Bambi 2. Overall, I think Bambi is a super unique film. Walt Disney in the very beginning tried to do really new and daring things with each and every one of his films, and with Bambi, he really actually strangely tried to go with a forest conservation message. Man is the enemy in the film. It's all about saving the forest and the creatures that live inside of it. The artistry is beautiful. It has a very significant effect on pop culture and film history. Despite it being pretty slow and not having that memorable of a soundtrack, it's definitely a significant piece in the history of Disney animation, and we need to show it some respect. Am I right? Anyway, let me know what your thoughts are about Bambi in the comment section down below. As always, leave a comment down below letting me know which movie you'd like me to do on Down to Disness next month. I have been in the habit of doing a Twitter poll to let you guys decide between 3 or 4 movies I'm thinking of, so definitely follow me on Twitter as well. And until I see you next time, have a magical day, and I love you. Bye!